She made a name in front of the camera, but behind the scenes, her heart always belonged to the garage her father built. Hidden beneath dust covers and old trophies were vintage rally cars, race-worn helmets, and a tribute that left even Courtney speechless. This wasn't just a garage. It was a love letter to speed, legacy, and family. Most people know Courtney Hansen as the confident host of Overhaulin, the face of Ride of Your Life, and a fixture in the custom car world. What they don't see is the part of her story that doesn't make it into interviews or behind-the-scenes footage. Because long before the TV lights, long before the camera angles and chrome-polished reveals, there was a garage, quiet, untouched, and deeply personal. Not a set, not a studio. A real garage. Her father's garage. Tucked away in Minnesota, hidden from the spotlight, sits the place where Courtney's love of cars didn't start on television. It started in oil-stained boots beside her dad, the legendary road racer Jerry Hansen. While she was building a name on screen, this garage, unassuming from the outside, held the real roots of her journey. To most, it looked like a forgotten building, but inside, it was a time capsule. A living museum built not for the world to see, but for a racer to remember. Courtney hadn't stepped inside in years. Life had moved fast. New shows, new family, new business ventures. But when she finally returned, something shifted. The moment the old metal door creaked open, it was like stepping into a memory. The air was still thick with the scent of rubber and fuel. Shafts of light broke through dusty windows, landing on covered shapes that hinted at forgotten horsepower. This wasn't just a garage, it was the quiet heart of her past. She wasn't there to film. She wasn't even sure what she'd find. But under those covers, behind those shelves, and buried beneath years of untouched dust, was a love letter to racing written not in ink, but in steel, sweat, and soul. And what she found next wasn't just history. It was personal. To understand the garage, you have to understand the man who built it, Jerry Hansen. To racing fans, he's a legend, a towering figure in American motorsport history, especially within the SCCA ranks. Over 400 career wins, multiple national championships. At one point, he held the record for the most SCCA national titles in history. He didn't just race, he dominated. In open wheel, in GT cars, even in prototypes. If it had wheels and noise, Jerry Hansen probably won in it. But to Courtney, he wasn't just a champion, he was dad. Her first memories of horsepower weren't in studios or television trailers. They were trackside, ear protection over her tiny head, watching her father fly down the straightaway in a Lola, braking late and disappearing into apexes. While other kids played house, Courtney played pit crew. She learned what throttle response felt like before she could ride a bike. Jerry didn't push her into cars. He didn't need to. The garage was her playground. Wrenches were toys, engine parts were puzzles, and every story he told had the soundtrack of revs and shifting gears. He taught her that speed wasn't just about horsepower, it was about precision, commitment, and instincts you couldn't fake. Even as Courtney became a television personality and custom car expert in her own right, her father's legacy quietly followed. She carried it with her, into every shop, onto every set. But that garage, that was the source. And when she returned to it, after all those years, it was like Jerry had never left. Courtney hadn't stepped into that garage in nearly a decade. Life had moved fast. TV shows, hosting gigs, raising her daughter, launching her own builds. But after the birth of her child and the passing of time, something inside called her back. Not to make content, not for an interview, just to revisit the place that raised her without ever saying a word. When she pulled up to the garage, it looked almost abandoned. Faded siding, a rusted lock on the main door, vines curling over one side like time had been trying to swallow it whole. But when she turned the key and pushed the door open, she wasn't met with silence. She was met with stillness. The kind of stillness that hums with memory. The smell hit her first. Old oil, grease, sun-baked rubber. The scent of race prep mornings and last-minute fixes. Then her eyes adjusted to the light and she saw it. Everything exactly how it had been. Benches stacked with tools, old spark plugs lined like museum artifacts, race suits hung on a pegboard, faded with time. Courtney didn't speak. She just walked, slowly, each footstep echoing through a space frozen in motion. And then she saw them, covered forms resting quietly beneath dusty gray tarps. She could already guess what lay beneath. Her heart pounded. Because under those covers weren't just machines, they were the ghosts of laps once lived, and memories waiting to be uncovered. Courtney hesitated before pulling back the first tarp. Dust puffed into the air, catching the sunlight like smoke. Beneath it, a 1970s Saab 99 rally car. Faded sponsor stickers, chipped flares, and a cracked windshield still peppered with rally dust. The next tarp revealed a Datsun 240Z. Not showroom perfect, not polished, but purposeful. Modified for rally stages, its body wore scars like medals. Faded paint, reinforced fenders. The names Hansen/McGregor still stenciled on the side in peeling vinyl. Courtney smiled. She remembered that co-driver. Scottish accent, big laugh, always chewing gum. But the real mystery was the last chassis. A low-slung coupe shape, European curves. No badging, no VIN, just raw aluminum and purposeful lines. Something about it felt secret, experimental, like a project Jerry had been building without telling anyone. The way the panels were riveted hinted at motorsport heritage, but it wasn't in any of his documented builds. Courtney stood there in silence, wondering, was this his final project? Or one he never finished? Each car wasn't just a vehicle, they were timestamps, snapshots of her father's obsession. And now, with no cameras around, she could finally see them the way he meant them to be seen. But what came next? The helmets on the far wall would hit even harder. The cars were powerful, but it was the helmets that stopped her. Mounted on a weathered plywood wall near her father's old workbench were more than a dozen race-worn helmets, each one a chapter in a life lived at full throttle. Courtney moved toward them like approaching sacred ground. The first was unmistakable. White with red pinstripes and the name Jerry Hansen, stenciled across the back in cracked lettering. It still bore faint tire scuffs. Not replicas, real damage. One helmet had a spiderweb crack running down the right side. She knew that story. Road America. A collision in turn 3 that could have ended a career, or worse. But Jerry climbed out, bloodied but smiling. Another helmet, matte black and narrow, had a sticker that read, "Do not wash, lucky." Courtney laughed. Her dad was never superstitious, except when it came to that one. Tucked behind the rest was the smallest helmet on the wall. Pink stripes. C. Hansen, in shaky marker. She'd almost forgotten it existed, a gift from her dad when she was 6. She used to wear it while helping in the garage, crawling into race cars too big for her body, but just right for her dreams. The chin strap was still frayed from all the times she refused to take it off. But one helmet stood out, slightly newer. Gold-tinted visor, still had dried mud crusted near the edges. And taped to the top, a tiny note, RA81, still hurts. Courtney smiled. Her father's shorthand, Road America again. The race he won but limped away from. He never told the full story, just said, "That car wanted to kill me. I beat it anyway." And beneath those helmets, a filing cabinet. Locked, unlabeled, and hiding the most personal chapter yet. Courtney ran her fingers along the top of the cabinet. It was dented, dusty, and had a lock so old it could have rusted shut. But the key, somehow, was still hanging on a hook nearby, labeled in her father's handwriting. Old Thoughts. That's what he called it. She turned the key, and the door creaked open. Inside, yellowed folders, film envelopes, handwritten letters on lined paper, some smudged with fingerprints. These weren't contracts or race entries. They were moments. Real ones. She pulled out one envelope marked Pre-Race Laguna Seca. Inside, a letter addressed to my crew chief, dated 1979. It was from Jerry to his lead engineer, a mix of technical notes and heartfelt thanks. It ended with, "Let's make this one for the books, and maybe for the bottle too." Another was a stack of Polaroids, grainy images of pit lanes, mechanics asleep on toolboxes, Jerry with a helmet under his arm and oil smudged across his brow. But nestled in the back of the drawer was a folded piece of pink construction paper. Courtney's eyes widened. It was a note she had written, her as a child. "Dear Daddy, I hope you win, but if you don't, you're still my favorite racer. Love, Courtney." There was even a crayon drawing of a race car with "Number 1 Dad" written on the door. The back was dated in her father's hand. Mid-Ohio, 1985. Best race I ever ran. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the note, but because he'd kept it. All those decades. It had lived in that drawer longer than some of his cars had existed. It was proof, undeniable, that even in the world of trophies and lap records, what mattered most was never the win. And behind that drawer, a sealed wooden crate with her name on it. It was heavier than it looked. The wood was hand-finished, the edges carefully sanded. No stickers, no labels, just a carved panel on top that read, "Courtney, open at retirement." Her heart caught in her throat. She hadn't known this existed. She'd never seen it before. With shaking hands, she popped the brass latches and opened the lid. Inside was a custom-built display, an entire life in 1:18 scale. Dozens of miniature cars, each placed on a soft black velvet platform. Every car her father had raced, recreated with surgical detail. Paint scuffs, tire wear, race numbers. Even the tiny sponsor decals matched old race footage she'd seen. Beneath each car was an engraved plaque. Watkins Glen, 1974, SCCA Nationals, 77, Lola T70, Road America, 81. And at the center of the case, a handwritten note laminated beneath the glass. "These were the best laps of my life. Every turn, every pass, every close call. I did it knowing you'd be watching. Thanks for every garage night, every cheering smile, and every hug before the green flag dropped." Love, Dad. Courtney couldn't speak. Her breath caught somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She reached down and gently touched the model of the Datsun, her favorite as a kid. The smell of the garage, the memories, the noise, they all came rushing back. This wasn't just a gift, it was a legacy, handcrafted in silence. And it reminded her of something she hadn't felt in years. Not just pride, but purpose. There were no cameras, no production crew, no scripts or retakes, just Courtney, alone in the garage, surrounded by memories that had been waiting years to be remembered. She sat down on the cold concrete floor, the model display still open in front of her. In her hands, she held the tiny replica of the Lola T70, her father's favorite. Her favorite. The one she used to pretend to race in the hallway with matchbox cars as a child. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The quiet was enough. A few tears ran down her cheek, not from sadness, but from weight. The kind of weight that only comes when you realize someone's been speaking to you for years without using words. This was that. Every car in that display, every note, every tarped chassis in the garage, it was all a message she was just now hearing in full. She took out her phone, not to post, but to record. Just a short video for her daughter. A walkthrough of the garage, a memory log. The way her dad had preserved the past, she wanted to preserve this moment too. Not for fans, not for a show, for family. Then she climbed into the actual Lola, the real one, the race-worn beast with decades of track history in its frame. She gripped the old suede wheel, still stiff with age, closed her eyes. For just a second, she could hear it again. The engine, the pit crew, the scream of tires, and the cheers of mid-Ohio echoing off the stands. And in that silence, she realized something no camera had ever captured. This garage was the first set of her life's story, and still the most honest. Courtney Hansen's career has been built in front of cameras. She's hosted some of the biggest custom car shows in the world. She's traveled, wrenched on legendary builds, earned respect in a male-dominated industry, and paved the way for women in the garage space. But none of that compared to what she felt in that dusty building her father once called a workshop. Because this was where it all started. Not with lights and microphones, but with grease-stained jeans and Sunday afternoons handing tools to her dad. She remembered the first time she used a torque wrench, not because someone taught her on a set, but because her father needed help adjusting a suspension late one night. No audience, just trust. In that garage, no one cared about ratings or sponsors. There were no critics, just moments. Learning how to gap spark plugs. Watching her father rebuild carburetors like an artist sketching by memory. Those lessons weren't about cars. They were about patience, about discipline, about care. And the older she got, the more she realized those traits had shaped every step of her life, even off camera. It's easy to build fame. It's harder to build roots. That garage was a time capsule, yes, but it was also a mirror. It showed her who she really was. Not the host, not the personality, not the brand, but the daughter, the builder, the one who got her hands dirty because love, in her family, was often expressed through machines. And no matter how far her career had taken her, that garage made one thing clear. She never really left it behind. Today, the Hansen garage looks much the same, but its purpose has changed. Part of it, Courtney decided, will remain untouched. A small section near the back, where the model display now sits in a glass case. Visitors can view the helmets, the Polaroids, the hand-marked blueprints that trace Jerry Hansen's racing evolution. It's a tribute not to victory, but to dedication. The rest of the space? It's alive again. Not sterilized into a museum, not frozen in time, but working, breathing. Courtney uses it as a test bed, sometimes for her builds, sometimes to teach her daughter the same lessons she once learned. It's not about legacy anymore. It's about continuing the story. The cars still smell like oil. The floor still squeaks in one corner. And the Lola? It hasn't been restored. It never will be, because the cracks and chips are part of the truth. the proof that this place was never built for appearances. It was built for real work, real memories, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. Visitors often ask Courtney why she didn't share this place earlier, why it stayed private for so long. Her answer? Because this garage wasn't built for TV. It was built for us. In a world chasing attention, Courtney Hansen found something far more lasting. In steel, dust, and the heartbeat of a garage that raised more than just cars. It raised a racer. It raised a storyteller. It raised a legacy.